The arrows. What precise feathers the arrows must have in order to fly. Chapter 13. To say that we found our way quickly would be to lie. It took us hours to get back on the right path, or at least the path we hoped was the right one. What was that? Do you think another witch? A sorcerer? Delia asked as we plodded along the moonlit path. That was the great mother, Tazanada, I said. I've been using her amulet, this ear pendant, to call on her for help along the way. Lullarulla gave it to me. She was right when she said we needed it. I peered at the map in my hand by the flickering light of our waning flashlight. It was hard enough not being able to read the map without having to worry about missing the landmarks altogether. But the moon hiding behind the cloudy sky, they were both impossible. You mean she's the one who gave you these earrings? Velia asked, reaching up to touch the ear pendant along my right cheek. We have special protection, Juanita said as she ran up to join our conversation. Isn't that cool? Yes, it is, but there's more. Lullarulla said we have to remain noble and kind. If we do that, everything will be all right. I said, relieved that she finally believed me. Then remembering Lullarulla and all that she had done for us so far, I began to wonder why she had not been the one to come to our aid. Had the Nagril been too powerful for her? If that was so, had she asked the goddess to help us herself? Was Lullarulla ultimately behind our salvation? I wonder if Mama knows what the song is really for, Velia said. Mama had sung that to us so many times I couldn't count. Now that the fog of the Nagril spell had lifted, I couldn't believe I hadn't made the connection sooner. She probably doesn't. I mean, who would have thought that some supernatural being was going to show up and save us because we sang her a song? Delia asked, stating the obvious. I always thought Mama's lullabies were magical, Peter whispered. When we were young and Mama used to sing to us, I felt special inside. I know what you mean, Juanita said, wrapping her arms around Peta. Her voice was so sweet, so loving. I always felt like we were more than her children. I felt like we were her life. It's almost as if she knew someday her lullabies would keep us safe from harm. So she made sure she sang to us every night. It's a wonder we forgot that song. Oh boy, it's getting deep out here, Velia said, making us think Mama's knows anything about Taznaza's coming to save us. Because I'll be honest, I don't know what the heck was going on when the goddess showed up. Whatever, Juanita retorted, letting Velia's negative comments slide right off her back like the cold butter of a warm tortilla. Ah, I'm saying is Mama knows the songs for a reason. Someone taught it to her. It's a lullaby, right? So it's being passed down from generation to generation. Mothers must have been singing it to their children since the time when Mama's ancestors, the Aztecs, were overpowered by the Spaniards. I followed the map and shoved it back into my backpack. Well, the bottom line is Lullarulla gave me the earrings to invoke her. And Teresa kind of let us know that Tazanada would come to our rescue, and she did. But now it's time we moved on. I pulled the backpack over my shoulder and started hiking through the thick brushes of the overgrown path. That's not true, Velia complained as she began to follow me and Juanita through the woods. Teresa never said anyone would help us. She just said we had to sing the song of the birds. I know, I was listening, and I have a photogenic memory. A photographic genius, Juanita spit out angrily at Velia, who had caught up and was now walking between us. It's called a photographic memory. And, anyways, I don't see how that would help you remember what you're being, since being a photographic memory deals with sight, not hearing. Okay, stop it, both of you. I don't want to have to separate you again, I yelled, moving between them as we made our way through the shrubbery and into a clearing. Well, Teresa didn't tell us we were in danger of being boiled alive in a cauldron, so forgive me if I don't want to push too much stock into what that old bag of bones had said, Velia complained, hiking her backpack higher up on her shoulder before she stalked ahead of us. I have a feeling there's a lot Teresa didn't tell us, Delia said, stopping and taking a swig of water from the gorge. She did warn us about the Nagro. She just wasn't very specific, Juanita said, turning back to face the road ahead. Yes, but there was more, I said. They knew what I was talking about. You mean the coven of the Lekis? Juanita whispered, looking at me sideways. You've got to find a place to hide before the night, before they find us, Velia said, looking to either side of the dirt path. Well, what do you know? Ask and ye shall receive. Delia punched my arm and pointed to the right of the path. I peered into the darkness, but I could see was a faint outline of faraway mountains against the dusky horizon. What is it? I asked, giving up on my poor eyesight. A barn! Peta screamed. She ran up in front of us and jumped up and down in place with excitement. Now hold on, I said, putting my hand on Peta's shoulder. Settle down. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. What? Velia wanted to know as she joined our united circle. What's wrong? Nothing, I said. Nothing's wrong. We just need to make sure it's okay to go in there. We need to be cautious, that's all. Teresa's husband said we could rest here. Why do we have to be so careful? Delia asked. Join us as we faced the barn. We just have to. That's all. Well, who's coming with me? I asked, looking around for a volunteer. Not surprised. Nobody said anything. You guys are all like Gilnas Caladas por Gutas, a bunch of clucking chickens, all talk and no actions. I started across the grass, heading for the barn on my own, although I was scared. I wasn't going to show it. I was the oldest. It was my job to bring them to safety. Of course, leaving them alone on the side of a dirt road in rural Mexico wasn't my idea of protecting them, but I didn't have much choice either. Wait, Juanita ran after me. Do you really think it's safe in that barn? I mean, what if the Laquitas are in there? Don't be ridiculous, I said. The Laquitas don't hide in barns at night. Owls are nocturnal predators. You should know that. You've seen every animal documentary on the Nature Channel. Oh, yeah. Even heard of barn owls, Juanita taunted. What do you think the Laquitas is? It's an owl, genius. Try keeping up. Whatever, Miss Gifted in Everything. I'm going to check it out. Are you coming with, or are you going back to cower with the rest of the brony hens? I guess I'm coming with, Juanita said, and she didn't sound too sure of it. Good, I said, starting off again. Let's get on with it. I'm tired, and judging from this humidity, it's going to rain soon. Side by side, we hiked through the overgrown meadows of the beaten path. We had to be very careful because the field was full of burrs and sting weeds, so we traveled slowly, stomping the tall grass down as we went. When we finally got to the barn, we found an old oil lamp hanging just inside the door. I jiggled the compartment in the underside of the tin relic and found 2 long, thick matches. while Juanita held the flashlight over me. I lifted the filthy cobwebbed glass and lit a match. To my surprise, the wick lit right up, and after shaking it a bit, I could hear that there was enough kerosene in it to keep it going for a while, maybe even all night. That would help keep PETA from getting scared. We should conserve what's left of the battery. I turned off the flashlight and stuffed it back into Juanita's backpack. Looking around the barn, we saw that it was most definitely abandoned. There were some old rusty tools laying by about, and some desiccated straw lined the far left corner. But half of the roof was either missing or about to fall off. Nevertheless, we decided it was good enough shape for us to offer some semblance of security for the night, however pitiful it might be. The girls were delighted to hear the news. Once inside, PETA walked around the poorly lit barn for a while, playing with an old rusty rake and a pitchfork she'd found in the stall. The rest of us emptied the contents of the backpacks and lay on several rumpled layers of clothing. Unlike PETA, who was still playing with the rake, Juanita and the twins and I had no desire to expand any more energy than we already had. It had been a hot, tiring 2 days of walking since we left El Sacafaso, and our journey was far from over. If Teresa's husband's hand-drawn map was even sort of accurate, we haven't covered half the ground we intended to today. We are just content to rest our feet and curl up in a semi-cozy place. I got PETA to finally settle down beside me. But even after everyone else fell asleep, I lay wide awake, looking up at the stars through the wide hole in the ceiling. We had traveled so long and so far from the first night when I had seen the series of stars fall from the sky like the meteor shower that I wondered if we'd ever get back to life again, back to those long, playful days without danger or witches or warlocks. At the thought of Mama crying every day, fearing for our lives, tears starting to prick at my eyes, I wiped them away. It was then that I saw several tiny figures flying in and out of my field of vision over the barn. Bats? I asked myself quietly, sitting up to get a better look. No, Juanita whispered as she too sat up. They look too big to be bats. I know, I said, keeping my eyes on the creatures above. I shook the other girls awake. What? Velia mumbled, half asleep. Leave me alone. They're here, I whispered, because by then I figured it out. Velia sat up so fast she stirred Delia beside her. Who? Mama? Delia sprang up into a sitting position beside her twin, and her eyes went to the door on the other side of the barn. No, I whispered, pointing at the creatures. They had stopped flying and now were perched side by side around the hole in the ceiling, peering down at us from the darkened heavens. Lachitas, Velia asked, searching the sky. There's 6 of them, I said, nodding. I counted them twice. Then it's not them, Juanita said, putting a hand on her chest, still scared, but sounding pretty relieved. You need 13 to make it a true coven. They must be regular owls, if they're fewer than that. Maybe the other 7 are dead, Delia whispered. Or maybe, Delia interjected, they split up and the others are on their way. I remained frozen, unsure of whether to react with startled the Lakitas into an attack. Regular owls aren't that big, and they don't travel in brooms. I said, no, it's them. I reached for my backpack slowly, trying not to show fear. Parliament, Juanita whispered from beside me on the nest of the clothes. What? I asked, confused. A group of owls is called a parliament, not a brood, she exclaimed. That's chickens. Hens, actually. Oh, like that matters right now? I started to move my hand slowly toward the tiny front pocket of my shorts, pulling the piece of silk string out of it without drawing too much attention to myself. Sorry, Juanita said. Do you have the string? Yes, I whispered. I put it in a safe place as soon as Teresa handed it to me. But I need you to wake PETA up without scaring her. Once everyone's awake, we have to form a protective circle around me so they can't get to me while I tie the knots. Okay, Delia and Vili whispered in unison. I could hear the Lakitas whispering manically above me, up on the roof, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. I unzipped the tiny front pocket of my shorts as slowly as possible, trying not to draw attention to myself. But the minute I pulled out the piece of the marked silk thread, the Lakitas launched themselves off the roof and flew into the barn, wailing and screeching. Startling awake by the Lakitas' blood-curdling screams, PETA sat up and screamed almost as loud as the winged witches. From that moment on, everything happened very fast. The Lakitas descended upon us with all their fury. As they came at us, I saw that they were as big as vultures, and their wingspan was twice their length. Their long, scraggly hair streamed behind them like raggedly moth-eaten capes as they flew at us. But the most horrific parts of them were their faces. They looked like dried up pieces of fruit, desiccated human faces, witches with metallic beaks for lips. The coven of the Lakitas squawked and screeched as they flew in and grabbed at us with steel talons, pulling out chunks of our hair, shredding our clothes, and scratching our arms, hands, and faces as they flew by. One at a time, they soared up into the rafters and swooped down to do it all over again. If they had been less aggressive, less calculating, we might have been able to defend ourselves. But they were so fierce and so erratic in their attacks, we never had a chance. Nala malas, said one in Mama's voice. Maquilas, said another in La Larola's voice. And chatas, said one with Cecilia's voice. Apitas, said another in Teresa's voice. According to them, we were evil children, spoiled, rotten, and selfish. We should repent. They kept chanting over and over again as they screeched at us with their sharpened talons. Repent, repent, repent. Stop, Juanita screamed as she swatted them away with her hands. Stop, stop, we cried as we whacked at them. But no matter what did or how much we begged, they wouldn't stop. If anything, their viciousness grew even more intense as they started to abuse us. The rain we had been expecting started to pour down on us through the holes in the roof. There was no escape from the feathers and the rain. The wind picked up, and I could hear thunder in the distance. I remember the piece of silk thread, and I realized I was clutching it. But no sooner had I looked at it than one of the Lakitas clawed it out of my hand. I tried to hold on to it, but the evil bird was too strong. She flapped her wings in my face, slapping my head with her sharp, bristly feathers. I was tugged against her, holding on to the string for dear life, when one of the feathers pricked me right in the eye. With intense pain shot through my eye like a bullet, and I let go of the string. Taking the string with her, the Lakitas flew out of the barn through the hole in the roof into the darkness and rain. And just when I thought things couldn't get even worse, Vilya and Delia rolled away from the rest of us. Screaming, they made a mad dash for the door and the other side of the barn, were two Lakitas on their backs. They busted out of the barn as if their heels were on fire. Never once looking back, had they abandoned the Hermitas? I looked at the barn doors noisily, slapping back and forth with the force of the storm, and I couldn't help but feel powerless. The twins' desertion shattered any hope I had left of defeating the malevolent witches, and for the first time in our journey, I wanted to cry. But there was no time for that. With the twins gone, the remaining Likitas concentrated on the rest of us. Two of them dived so fast and hard into me that they knocked me over. One of them sat on my chest. Another one had Juanita pinned face up against a pile of clothes we had to use to make ourselves a nest. Peta was pressed against the wall, shivering, while a Likitas pecked gently at her head as if it were picking nits out of her hair. You like eating sweets, don't you? The Lakitas, with Cecilia's voice, pulled Peta in close until their face was almost touching. That's because you are a piglet, a little piggy with a piggy nose and a piggy mouth and a piggy stomach. You're a chubby baby, but give me time. I'll put some real meat on your bones, thicken you up, and get you ready to be eaten. My sisters and I haven't eaten much lately. Your big brown eyes look delicious. I bet they taste sweet slithered with jalapeno marmalade. How'd you like your adventure now, you arrogant little twit? Alaquitas, with Inez's voice, asked Juanita as she caressed her face with the bristling feathers of her left wing. What? Do you think you're smarter than them? Well, you're not. You drag them all into this mess. Well, with your self righteousness. Juanita stiffened and hiccuped as she tried in vain to stop herself from bawling. Oh, what's the matter now? Why are you crying? Are you sad? Maybe you should have listened to your older sister. Maybe you should have stayed home and cleaned and cooked like your mother instead of thinking you've got brains. You think you can fool me? The one with Mama's voice asked me. She was sitting on top of me, kneading into my chest with her claws like a cat, laughing when I winced in pain. Answer me, she screamed. But instead of talking, I looked straight into her red, fiery eyes with what I was hoping was disdain. What's the matter? Aren't you afraid? What are you running away? She asked. And when I didn't answer, she dug her sharp talons deeper into my chest. The pain was horrendous, and I wanted to scream out, but I held my breath instead. Of course you do. I know how much of a coward you really are. I know how irresponsible you can be. Who's the one who relinquished the piece of thread? Who's the one who protected your sisters now? Who? She was shaking at me. She was shaking me then, grabbing me by my shirt collar and rattling me like she wanted to loosen the last breath out of my chest. I closed my eyes and started to pray, silently and first, and then with more courage and more conviction. But my prayers were useless against her. Instead of getting off my chest, she started to laugh, a deep, crackling laugh that vibrated inside my head and made me lose my place in prayer. That's who, whispered the Lakita, her rotten breath caressing my neck like a dirty rag, penetrating into my every pore. You. She kept screaming and parroting of Mama's voice, spitting saliva on my face. You dressed like me. You took them away. You left me crying. You lost the thread. Her words spoken in Mama's voice pierced through my heart, and I screamed in agony. No, it's not true. It's not. Just when I thought all was lost, Vilya and Delia bursted through the barns, door wielding what could only be described as a giant metal baseball bat. I didn't know what kind of tool they were or where they came from. All I know is they looked absolutely dangerous. Die, the twins screamed as they charged in our direction. The Lakitas screeched angrily, let go of us, and scattered themselves around the room. One by one, they flapped their wings and took flight, soaring above us, cursing our names and threatening to take their revenge. You take the pitchfork, I called the rake. I told Juanita. I scrambled to my feet and rushed to the other side of the barn where Peta had abandoned the rusty old tools. You can't hurt us. We're the Avengers, the devil's playmates, the one with La Rola's voice screeched. You've caused too much heartache and pain. You disrespected Cecilia, humiliated her, and now you have to pay, the one in Teresa's voice yelled from the rafters. You'll never get away, the one in Mama's voice screamed as she descended upon me. With all my strength, I battered at her with a brittled rake. She flew around me to avoid getting hurt, but she wasn't completely successful. I clipped her right ring and she screamed in rage, or maybe it was pain. I shook the feathers out of the rake and prepared myself for the next attack. Just drew her close, Velia whispered. She and Delia inched themselves towards Juanita and me. We can take these witches, Delia announced. Watch your mouth, I warned out of habit, although this time I would had to agree with the colorful language. These creatures were more than wicked. They were downright malevolent. Repent, 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 the Lakitas screeched as they swooped down on us like squadron of fighter planes. We stood side by side, all four of us, defenselessly holding up our weapons like ninja warriors, while Peta huddled behind us, defenseless without a weapon to wield. Claws, feathers, and hair flew everywhere during the first onslaught, but through it all, we never quit. We battered and struck and clubbed and raked as we did. One by one, the Lakitas flew off our weapons, hit the barn walls, and fell to the ground, squealing like stuck pigs. When Juanita pierced through one of them with her pitchfork, it screamed out, Calaveras, convulsed, and then lay lifeless. So that's how we got rid of most of them. The twins and I clubbed and raked them until they were stunned and dazed, and Juanita finished them off by staking them. By the time we were done, the place was bloody, feathery, eerie mess. We stood side by side, looking past the settling debris, not daring to talk in case we were dreaming wide awake. I knew I should be shocked, horrified even, that we had just slaughtered a group of beings, not human perhaps, but living, breathing beings in their own right. But the blood was pumping furiously through my body, wishing away my remorse. I felt maybe it was the danger they had posed, or maybe I was just becoming psychotic. But I didn't feel guilty at all. I felt strong and powerful and vindicated as I kicked the bloody, splattered, feathery lump out of my way and headed for our nest near the corner of the barn. You did it, Peta squealed and jumped for joy beside me. You saved us. She shook fuzzy remnants from her of feathers out of her hair and spat them off her face. Wow, Juanita whispered. I still caught in a dreamlike state. We killed them all. Can you believe it? We won. We defended them. No, we haven't, I said, looking up to the hole of the ceiling above our nest. The rest of them are back. Up in the sky, behind the rest of the perched, calculated Lakitas, there was a twinge of pink in the purple of their face of night. Dawn was coming soon. The sun was about to rise. I said, if we ever want to be able to sleep again without fearing of our lives, we have to finish them. I lost the silk thread, though. How could we do that? What Teresa told us to would defeat the Lakitas. I was bemoaning our flight internally again when I saw Peta, disheveled in her best Sunday dress, and I realized we'd had the solution all along. Come here, Peta. When she came closer, I grabbed the tiny bow at her collar and yanked it off her dress with one hard tug. What are you doing? She wailed. Give that back. I'd ripped it off cleanly without damaging the dress. But the bow was the thing Peta loved most about the dress. She was understandably upset and reached for the bow. I held it out of reach until I could untie the bow and smooth it out between my fingertips. I need it, Peta. It's silk, I explained, ripping it so I could pull out a single piece of thread. Peta pinched the collar and warned, This is my favorite dress. Shh. We'll get you a new one once we get back home. Watch my back, I whispered, stepping back to stand between Peta and Delia. Delia and Juanita closed the gap in front of me and stood wielding the farm tools before them, ready for the next attack. Piedras negras, quesitasa anlatitas. I started to say the Lord's Prayer in Spanish, only this time I was smarter about it. This time I held the thread tightly against my chest, since there was no way of marking it. I would simply make every knot sit tightly against the last. Teresa hadn't said the knots had to be set apart by any particular amount of space. She only said they had to be evenly spaced. So putting them side by side was, in my opinion, perfectly spaced. With every word I spoke, it seemed began to wane. Less and less of it fell in through the roof. As the first prayer ended, I closed the first knot, and the rain stopped completely, and the rest of the Lakitas stretched in pain and flew into the barn. They soared over us, ranting and raving and angrily flapping their wings. They circled and circled, creating a whirlwind of dirt, of debris, and dark mold, hay, and swirled all the way up to the ceiling. The miniature storm swirled and stood before us like a charmed snake, flickering our hair into our faces, wrapping it around our necks, choking us, stealing our breaths. But all the time, I stayed focused and prayed. Knot after knot, I tied. Prayer after prayer, I prayed. 7 Lord's Prayers, 7 Hail Marys, 7 Holy Marys. And it seemed that each one of these knots took away just a little bit more of the whirlwind strength. Shorter and shorter I got, and slower the Lakitas flew, until finally, as I tied the last of the 7 knots, a whisper of daylight broke through the roof, and the whirlwind died away. The 7 remaining Lakitas fell to the floor, dead. Their eyes closed, their feathers dulled, and their faces had become clean slates. Then the Lakitas, all 13 of them, vanished into thin air, leaving only drone feathers floating inconspicuously in the rays of the morning sun.